This evening, the former president is set to hold a rally at the, Crotona Park in the Bronx. Yes, President Joe Biden defeated Trump in the Bronx by over 67 points in 2020. In 2016, Donald Trump lost the Bronx to Hillary Clinton by nearly 80 points. And ahead of that rally, the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign is out with a brand new ad highlighting the dire threat Donald Trump poses to Black America if he's reelected.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Of course I hate these people.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
And it's more than anger, it's hatred.
It's why Trump stood with violent white supremacists, warned of a bloodbath if he loses the next election, and if he's president again, vowed to be a dictator who wants revenge on his enemies. Now, who do you think that is?
Of course I hate these people.
Rev, your thoughts on that ad?
I think that ad is, first of all, is accurate. I was involved in fighting him on housing discrimination and marched on him about the Central Park Five. So they're not stretching the truth. That is his record. And you must remember that in all of the racial issues we've had in New York, from Howard Beach in the 80s, where a black kid was killed just for being in a white neighborhood, till now, the only race-sensitive case Donald Trump ever stood up on was to say that 5 black and brown young men should face the death penalty when a white woman was brutally and viciously beaten and raped in Central Park, and it ended up they didn't do it, and he still wouldn't take it back. He never stood up on any other issue. He was president when George Floyd happened, the biggest case in recent memory. He was president and did nothing other than say, if the looting starts, the shooting starts. So, Congressman Torres, and you and I have worked on many of these issues together. For him to come to your district, first of all, he'll probably import some of the crowd because there's certainly not a lot of fervor for him there. But I think that he's using it as a prop, since he's kind of cornered into having to be in New York and can't do a lot because he's on criminal trial. How do you see the response in your district and in the Bronxes of the country? Because it could backfire and energize a lot of people to get angry that he's maneuvering sort of as a backdrop to him being having to be in New York for his criminal trial.
I think as far as we're concerned, Donald Trump is nothing more than a criminal suspect facing 91 felony counts, desperately searching for a self-pardon. So it's obvious to all of us that his priority is not the people of the Bronx. His priority is a self-pardon and self-preservation. And I'm confident that the people of the Bronx are not going to buy the snake oil he's selling. I mean, his presidency was a catastrophe for the Bronx. His mismanagement of COVID left a death toll of more than 7,000 in the Bronx, which is greater than the combined death count of Pearl Harbor and 9/11. So instead of holding a rally in Crotona Park, he should be apologizing to the people of the Bronx for the damage he's done.
Willie.
Congressman, good morning. You've written a new op-ed in the New York Daily News titled "The Bronx Gives a Bronx Cheer to Donald Trump." In it, the congressman writes, quote, "The Bronx is the bluest county in America. Is Trump so arrogant as to believe he's the one Republican who can compete in the bluest congressional district? In answering that question, one must be reminded of who Trump is, a malignant narcissist with boundless delusions of grandeur. He once declared himself the best president ever for African Americans, even surpassing Abraham Lincoln. If only Lincoln had read The Art of the Deal, he tells himself, the Civil War would have been averted, just like October 7th or 9/11, or every human tragedy that has ever transpired would have been prevented by the omnipotence that Trump seems to attribute to himself. Any megalomaniac who ranks himself above Lincoln is too dangerously delusional to be anywhere near the Bronx, let alone the White House." That is the congressman's op-ed, part of it in the New York Daily News today. So, Congressman, there has been some concern if you look at polling, and we will use all the caveats that we're almost, 6 months away from Election Day. The Biden campaign believes that voters will come home, but we have seen in polling anyway at this early stage, some black voters, some Latino voters, in numbers larger than we've seen in the past for a Republican, and numbers larger than we've seen for Donald Trump over a couple of previous elections, at least saying they are open to the idea of voting for Donald Trump. How much stock do you put into those numbers?
Look, obviously, we have to be careful not to treat the Latino community as a monolith, right? There are elements of the Latino community that are open to voting for Republicans. George W. Bush won 40% of the vote in 2020. Having said all that, I'm confident that the Bronx is going to overwhelmingly reject Donald Trump. Based on the polling data that I've seen among likely voters in the Bronx, Donald Trump is so unpopular as to be radioactive. You know, he's even less popular than arsenic in the Bronx. So I'm confident that the Bronx is going to overwhelmingly support Joe Biden. I
wonder where this crowd is going to come from.
Yeah, I want to just pick up where Willie is. When you look at the numbers for African Americans, the economy has never been better for them. Wages never been better. Unemployment's never been better. Yet still, to Willie's point, there is a disconnect, particularly among black men. I can't figure that out. But try and explain it as best as you can.
Look, I sense men of all races. I see it among Latino men, African American men, white men. There is a bitter disillusionment with the system. There's a sense that the system is failing them, and that transcends any particular presidency. And obviously, there's a challenge of inflation, which has been a global problem. But you know, we have to tell the story of the Biden administration's success. We've had the fastest recovery from COVID of any major economy in the world. The president is addressing the cost of living. The Bronx has among the highest rates of diabetes. Capping the price of insulin at $35 a month is a game changer and a lifesaver for the people of the Bronx. You know, President Biden created 15 million jobs compared to 2.9 million lost under Donald Trump. Donald Trump claims that he's in favor of cutting taxes. He imposed the largest tax increase in New York City in recent history. The loss of SALT deductibility cost our state $15 billion in revenue. So New Yorkers are paying more in taxes and receiving fewer services because of Donald Trump.
So, Congressman, you say you need to make the argument better. Democrats writ large need to make the argument
better. That was pretty good.
As to what the administration needs to do. And you started to there. But are there a few points that seem like the Biden team is very proud of, haven't broken through yet? Like, for instance, the economy, you mentioned that. Yeah. But also that it was Republicans who blocked this border bill. And it seems like immigration and migrants, a major issue here in New York City, also resonates nationally. The crime has actually gone down in most places this year. How can they be sharpening their message to have that actually break through? Because polls suggest it's not.
Look, I think we have to follow the Tom Suozzi model in New York 3, right? Instead of standing by passively and allowing the Republicans to weaponize the issue of border security, he leaned in. He proactively owned it. He diffused the bomb, so to speak. And I feel like that should be the template that we follow on a national stage.
Brad.
Don't we, aren't we helped by looking at 2020 when the polls also said that Trump was having this bump up with black men, and it didn't happen. And I think, again, we're repeating the same mistake that, yes, some black men will go there as they did in 20, but he ended up getting just about what most Republicans got. And I think that we shouldn't get twisted with that. The other thing I want to ask you, Congressman, it has been suggested to me, we don't know the makeup of his jury in this hush money trial. And maybe there's some blacks and Latinos in the jury. Maybe this thing tonight is really about his lawyers saying we need to soften up some people in the jury that may look at you as racist or bigoted, because he could not be campaigning for votes. He could be campaigning to a jury.
Look, if Donald Trump did not have a criminal trial in New York City, he would never be caught dead in the Bronx. And as far as I'm concerned, the only place in the Bronx where Donald Trump has any place being is Bronx Criminal Court.
Okay.